And we're back. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, this is Let the Record Show. I am Mike Pizzo.
I am Warren Peace.
And I'm A-Trak.
Today's special guest, A-Trak, Fool's Gold Records, and basically you gave us a list of your favorite songs.
Yep.
And we went digging and found everything on vinyl, a lot of it.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
You know, and now we're going to talk about those records and let the record show.
Let's do it.
All right.
Dun, 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 dun.
Hey, what you say? Get this started.
All right, first up we have Slum Village, Get This Money, and this is a bootleg of Fantastic Volume 2, which T3 actually signed and wrote. This is a bootleg of the Slum Village album.
There's so many different pressings of their records.
Yeah, because they had that whole, before they went to Good Vibe,
Yeah.
they had that whole era where like the album was just circulating on tape. And
Yeah,
it was,
Volume 1 was.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Volume 2 I think as well, and then like,
yeah.
you know, anyway, they went to Interscope for a minute,
Uh-huh.
and then eventually Good Vibe picked it up, and you know, but this is during the interim when someone bootlegged it. So, yeah, let's get the first record. So it was which one was it?
Get This Money.
Get This Money. All right.
It's a Jeep beat.
That is a really good looking bootleg.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah.
What can you tell us about this record?
I mean, in general, Dilla is my favorite producer.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a number of Dilla records I could have chosen
Yeah.
for the list,
Yeah.
but I've always felt like Get This Money is like in the special zone. In a way, it's not the typical Dilla record.
Mhm.
You know, it's not like the jazzy Tribe Called Quest thing. It sounds like a West Coast Jeep beat,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it's so eerie. So my favorite characteristic of pretty much everything Dilla's done is that eeriness, where it's like you can't really pinpoint the exact vibe. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
like deep and moody, but knocking and hard at the same time.
Mhm.
And this is a really odd Herbie Hancock sample that has like, I want to say it's a 9-bar loop. It's not a regular bar
Right.
count.
Right.
Oh wow.
So like the nerd in me always likes unusual
Yeah,
bar
yeah.
counts. So it's, to me, it's that weird combination of like, on one hand, it just sounds like a sort of Jeep banger, but on the other hand, it's a vocoder loop that's an irregular bar count.
Right.
So that just speaks to me.
Yeah.
I like the snare. The snare is always like
Oh, this
that
is
type
the
of
snare.
snare.
It's
Like
all-
you said,
they're
the
so
West
crisp.
Coast groove to it.
that
Yeah.
clap and like
Yeah.
that
Yeah, the clap. Yeah.
Yeah, that fuzzy sort of like Moog bass, and the verses are crazy on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rest in peace to Batan
and Dilla.
And Dilla, yeah.
Yep. Shout out to T3.
Shout out to T3.
But yeah, this record's crazy. I think it's funny thinking of making a list of like favorite records. Like
Yeah.
if you ask a DJ to make a list of favorite records, it like depends what day you ask them.
Of course.
Right.
So like I could have there's 100 records I could have named you, but it's cool to reflect on records from different eras and think of like timeless ones. Right?
Yep.
Like this could have come out, you know, it could have come out in like 96
Yep.
or in 2001 or this year.
Right.
Yeah.
And it would still bang.
And this is probably what, around 99, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. Maybe 2000 or
Yeah, 99.
99? Yeah.
So where were you at this is back when you were kind of on the battle circuit and
Yeah.
Obscure Disorder.
Yeah,
and-
exactly. 99. Yeah, that late 90s for me is exactly that. Still living in Montreal.
Yeah.
Still doing the DMCs and the battles.
Yeah.
And my brother and I we're getting involved in the indie hip hop hustle,
Yes.
which is where we all met.
Yeah.
Something like
Yeah.
this.
But yeah, Obscure Disorder was the name of the rap group in Montreal
Yeah.
that my brother used to produce. I was DJing and helping produce too. And
Yep.
you know, we would all just. Yeah, I was getting into like record pools for the first time, just ingesting all this music and really embracing the underground scene, and kind of nerding out.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, we all were, and I remember that era very well. You did a hiphopsite.com like Obscure Disorder scratch routine.
Oh, you're right.
Yes.
Wow.
And Dave hooked that up. Shout out Dave. And it was so crazy when Chromeo came out
Yeah.
because I was like, oh, I used to buy records from this dude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Dave's my brother. And,
Yeah.
you know, we grew up in the underground hip hop scene, but now he's known as, you know, one half of Chromeo.
Yep.
And it's funny because when Chromeo started, it was essentially Dave's non-hip hop project.
Right.
Like that's the way that the band came to be at first, just an outlet for all these other ideas.
Right.
And he never used to sing or any of that. Like
Mhm.
I remember when, you know, the first time he sang on a record, we were all like,
We like, who's this? Who's singing?
This kind of works. Yeah. But yeah.
Uh-oh. But it's too late. It's too late.
All right, next up we have Kanye's late registration album, and your cut on here was "Gone" with Cameron, and
Heavy.
let me start this record.
Okay.
This is the last track on the album, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Were you DJing for Kanye at that point?
Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah,
tell
I
us
came-
about your life at that point, 'cause that must have been crazy.
It's funny because it was kind of a double life.
Yeah.
In the sense that I had, one foot in the DJ circuit that, I'd been building in for years already.
Right.
I was done with battling, but just, this is pre-Fool's Gold. This is just me being out on the road playing early festivals and clubs, but also this was also an era when the cross-pollination of genres was just starting. So I would go to Europe and pick up some electronic stuff and bring it back and do mashups. This is the mashup era. This is the MySpace era.
Yep.
This is when walls were coming down.
Uh-huh.
I started working with Kanye right after College Dropout came out.
Yeah.
So in 2004, went on tour with him, and that turned into 4 years of touring. And basically between those tours, I would carry out what I was just talking about: my gigs, new projects, new creative partnerships, and just expanding even what it meant to be a DJ at the time, I think. But I was there as Kanye made this album, and it was interesting to see, first of all, this sort of the progression, in the sense that from that point on, every new Kanye album was a new idea, a new sonic palette.
Right.
So many people were in love with College Dropout. He could have made 4 College Dropouts.
Of course,
or
yeah.
whatever, and that could have been his thing.
Yeah.
But when he made late registration, and he brought in John Bryan and started experimenting, expanding the sonics.
Yes.
That was a sort of sign that every other album was going to expand in different ways too. Gone is my joint. I mean, look, I have to pick a Kanye song in my favorite records. He's my favorite artist.
Right.
And I'm not gonna pick the obvious single.
Right.
Going
Gone
Gold
is-
Digger or nothing like.
Yeah. I don't know. I worked on Gold Digger. But, I mean, it's too easy to pick a single,
Right.
and there's certain singles that you sort of get tired of after
And
a
you're
while.
a Cameron fan, so.
Yeah, I'm a
there you
Cameron
go.
fan. But the thing with Gone to me is, it's just such a ill balance of just a hard ass beat and raps.
Yes.
Kanye's last verse
Uh-huh.
on Gone, which is the last verse of the album, he spazzes.
Yes.
To me, the last verse on this song is probably Kanye's best verse. Period.
The other piece of this record too is also, John Bryan had a heavy role in this whole album.
Yeah.
But the strings, the orchestral, he just added so much.
He added so much without adding too much.
Right.
That's the other thing I love about Gone compared to what John Bryan did on, say, Diamonds from Sierra Leone or some of these other records. It didn't take over the song.
Right.
I love the fact that Gone is just a knockin' hip hop beat with one layer of surprising musicality, but it's still raw, it's still bare bones. It's some gritty hip hop shit.
Perfect way to put it, surprising, because you aren't really ready for those strings to come in, and when they do, I remember the first time I heard it, and when the strings came in, I was
moving.
oh, this is good.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
And Kanye, and we were just talking about Dilla, and he is heavily influenced by Dilla as
For
well.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and again, I think with finding the surprising element. I think one thing that both Ye and Dilla have been great at in their beat making over the years is making surprising choices with production, but always keeping the anchor of fucking boom bap, of knocking beats. This has, the string section, especially in this bridge thing that's playing right now, is it sounds like almost some Hans Zimmer cinematic shit, but it's also a boom bap record.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The
It
beats
never
still go in.
exactly.
They didn't EQ it out.
It never
It's
gets
still
too
kicking, yeah.
jazzy. It never gets too
Right.
art house. It keeps that foundation
Right.
of gritty hip hop.
And do you? I personally think this is Kanye's best record. My second favorite is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. But where do you stand on your favorite?
As far as albums,
Yes.
Ooh, depends what day you ask me too.
Yeah.
Um,
For me, the first two, this one and You
Oh, yeah?
College Dropout, yeah.
And then the other ones were good, but these two were like, whoa. He
Yeah.
came
Yeah.
on his. And the other thing is, my introduction to Kanye was at a music seminar, I think in Miami or something, and he had just got into the accident.
Yeah.
And he was like on his panel, he's talking, he's really quiet, and everyone's like, this Kanye guy. And he sits, he grabs the mic and just says, listen, guys, my name's Kanye West. You guys are all college DJs. I really need you to support me.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
name's not on the wall. They really don't give a shit about me.
Yeah.
I'm like the 5th priority. And it was just like, whoa. I was like, this guy, we got to follow this guy.
Yeah.
I found this when we were digging through stuff, and this is the Rockefeller Records All-Star Calendar 2003-2005, and it's interesting. I'll put it down there first.
Dude, well, no, this is extra interesting because this is exactly the context in which I met Kanye, especially with Samantha Ronson's
Yeah.
photo on
Wow.
here. So I met Kanye and Dame on a trip to London in 2004. The College Dropout was out, and there was a Rockefeller sort of like press trip
Right.
to London. And I was doing an in-store to promote my show, and that same shop got Samantha to come and perform when she was doing like
Yeah.
guitar, singer-songwriter stuff.
Yeah.
And then Dame sort of linked me with Kanye, but this is exactly a slice of time
Right.
of when I linked with Kanye.
And what's really interesting is, I'm going to put this down so everyone
Yeah.
can see it, but what's really interesting is he was like voted least likely to succeed out of that whole class right there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Exactly.
no, seriously, like
Yeah.
he was,
Yeah.
because he funded Through the Wire himself, the video,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, so I mean, like you look, some of those artists, like,
He loves to remind people.
yeah, ODB, that never came out. I think
Yeah.
MOP never came out.
Yeah.
I might be wrong about that, but I feel like, several of those artists never put records out, and Kanye self-funded his own record and now is like the biggest artist. All right. Next up, we have Daft Punk's Homework LP, and we'll just start this record off because
There it is.
there it is.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about Kanye West, and you actually introduced Kanye West to Daft Punk's music, correct or incorrect? Yes.
Yeah.
And then he did Stronger.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Against my will.
tell us about that.
I didn't think we should sample it. Let me paint the picture when this came out for me. Grew up in Montreal.
Yeah.
Hip hop kid.
Yeah.
I didn't listen to dance music or electronic music. In fact, I wasn't going out to clubs. I was 14 when this came out or something.
Yeah.
But so the little electronic music I was exposed to was stuff that had a video that was playing on like the Canadian version of MTV.
Okay.
Shout out to Music Plus. So I was a huge Beastie Boys fan. Always will be. Like that's the group that had the biggest impact in my life. In fact, I probably should have chosen the Beasties record in this list, but hey, you
Fair
know,
enough.
that was just where my head was that day.
Yeah.
So as a Beasties fan, I was a Spike Jonze fan.
Right.
He directed all the videos.
Yep.
So Spike Jonze made the video for this song, and they kept playing on TV. And again, like I was saying, I wasn't checking for electronic music, but this is a track that'll catch your ear if you're a hip hop fan.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
And it's funny because years later, I read in interviews that basically they said that they were trying to make a Warren G kind of beat when they made it. And it's a trip to hear like French house guys
Yes.
be like, hey, let's make a Warren G beat. And this
Yeah.
is what they made,
Right.
which is not a Warren G
Not
beat.
Right.
at all.
But it used in the intention,
Of course.
it appeals to hip hop ear.
Yes.
And so the only electronic music I was receptive to in those years when I was such a diehard hip hop fan had to have some sort of like attribute or aesthetic. Had some sort of attribute that was shared with hip hop.
Okay.
And this is like made on an MPC.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like you can hear it in the bang of the drums.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you mentioned, even the fact that it was a different kind of tempo.
Like
It's
108.
111, I think, or 110.
Yeah.
It's funny because, especially in electronic music where there's a lot of trends and things tend to fall into like the formula of that year or whatever, it feels like in hindsight, I've kind of learned that like it's easy to make something that follows the formula of the time and to have
The popular.
the popular record
The
that's-
sound of the moment.
yeah, and then
yeah.
it'll, you'll be in the charts for like 2 months or something.
Yeah, yeah. Let me
and
get
it
the
feels like you have a hit.
keyboards, or
Yeah, and it feels like you have the hit of the season or whatever.
Yeah.
But the records that break the formula and the formula are the ones that you'll talk about 20 years
Of
later.
course.
Right? So this completely broke the formula, and it's so daring, and we're talking about it now 20
Yeah.
plus years later.
I mean, and really their whole approach. I mean, when I heard Discovery, I was aware of this record as well, but when I heard Discovery, I was like, these guys are chopping the samples like hip hop producers.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Like Premiere. Like,
Yes.
like that's how they were cutting the samples up.
100%.
And I was like, oh, this is.
Yeah.
And that was my like real introduction. That and
Yeah.
Cold Cut, but yeah, those were
Yeah.
Yeah.
kind of the.
Yeah, that's
know?
where you're sort of reminded that in fact that all hip hop and electronic music come from the same family
Right.
tree,
Yeah.
and there's a point where it branched off, but there's a lot of like moments of intersection and crossbreeding.
Yeah.
Where 100% Daft Punk were using their MPCs and chopping beats the same way as hip hop producers were.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
This one also, because I was DJing a lot in clubs at this point of view, and this one, when this one became popular, it also rose the BPMs for other popular music.
Oh yeah.
So a record like, as a DJ, a record like this comes out at 108, 110, and everything's at 100. So you're
Yeah.
like, how the fuck am I gonna get up?
yeah.
to
And then
this.
other people trying to
Yeah,
match.
yeah, and you didn't have master tempo or anything back then. So
Yeah.
you're like, how you? So all of a sudden, when one or two come out that same tempo,
Yeah.
you're like, okay, cool, I got a set
Right.
down here
And then you
now.
have a set.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that-
exactly.
I
that
can
changes
build
the
off of
whole
this.
landscape of the music.
Changes the
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
thing, yeah, and it's
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
funny to see how when tempo changes, you saw it when everyone went down to 88 or 60
Right.
whatever. Like you said, okay, everything's down, okay, everything's high. Like,
Right.
Yeah. And by the way, it's funny. I mentioned the MP when they were making Discovery, but in those years, they were using the SP1200, and you can really hear it. Like again, when I talk about records that appeal to hip hop ear,
Right.
a lot of the French house records from like 96 to 98 were made on the SP. So if you were listening to Pete Rock beats and then you heard Stardust or something by Nightclub or
Right.
whatever, there's a reason why it appealed to us.
Right.
right.
It was
right.
that same grain.
All right, next we have the Justice Cross LP, which is lovingly referred to as Cross. And your cut on here is Phantom Part 2.
Yeah.
And you also like the Soul Wax remix, you told me.
Yeah.
But tell us. Let's
So,
hear this.
I mean, this era is very dear to me.
Mhm.
A lot of this music now we call it blog house because
Yes.
it's electronic music that thrived on blogs.
Yep.
And for a lot of reasons, these were formative years for me. Even though I was sort of like at the 10-year mark of my career
Right.
as a DJ, but this is when I started coming into my sound as a producer, and this era laid the groundwork for music that I started making or signing or championing or whatever.
Mhm.
And the way that all these records were just spreading on blogs and there's so much cross-pollination after years of like segmented genres, for me that was incredibly inspiring and exciting. So this is when I really got into electronic music, right? So
Okay.
I mentioned like maybe something like a Daft Punk record would have grabbed my ears in the 90s, but it's in the mid-2000s that I found records that I fully embraced, and I started playing entire sets
Right.
of this sound.
Right.
I remember the first time I played a set that didn't include a rap record, where I was like,
Right.
"Oh, I just did a whole set without a rap record."
It's a
This
proud
is
moment, right?
Well, it's just like, wow, this is a change,
Yeah.
Right.
and it happened so progressively. But I think a lot of what I like about the records that came out around this time, whether it be Justice or Soulwax or whoever else, was that there was, in all these different countries and these different sort of sub-scenes, there was people who didn't have a background in electronic music who were starting to make electronic music,
Right.
but they brought baggage with them.
Right.
Right? So Soulwax were a sort of Belgian but Britpop band,
Yeah.
a rock band. And then when they made electronic records, it was with that approach and their instruments. Similarly in the UK, like Simian Mobile Disco, they had that big record,
Yeah.
Hustler.
Yeah.
Simian was a rock
Hustler,
band.
baby.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
a rock band that just knew about electronic culture because everyone in the UK takes drugs and goes to raves. So that was them dabbling into techno. This is, the two Justice guys were literally graphic designers. They were just like aesthetic guys.
Yeah.
They were
yeah.
two dudes who had excellent taste and who mainly loved rock music,
Right.
who decided to make electronic music and figured out how to distort shit on Cubase and whatever else.
Right.
But it sounds so different, and like it's such a weird intersection.
At that time, it was completely.
It was unlike anything else. So they brought the energy and the grit of rock and roll
Mhm.
into electronic music, and that's what made me love these records. Was that I wasn't dance music fan per se, for starters. But I loved rock. Like I grew up on Zeppelin before even
right.
getting into hip hop.
Yep.
So if someone makes rock and roll riffs with banging drums and it's distorted
Sold,
and
yeah.
and it's got like chopped, like they chopped the
Yeah.
sample on this. They sampled Goblin, the like Italian soundtrack
Yeah.
music.
Okay.
So if you're chopping samples, that appeals to my primo ear.
Right.
And then you're distorting rock and roll riffs that it speaks to like 11-year-old me
Right,
that
right.
was listening to rock.
Now, do you think you got into this genre more because you were traveling around the world and you
Yeah,
had more
prob-
access to it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was starting to find a few blogs where I would download stuff,
Yeah.
but then I would go to France. I remember one specific trip before Ed Banger really got popular in North America. I went to Paris for a show in like 2005 or 6. I'm not sure. I think 5 maybe. And my boy was like, "Yo, there's this label Ed Banger. They're doing cool stuff." And Busy Pete was familiar with like,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
DMC work or
Right.
whatever. So, it was easy for me to just pop into the office and say what's up. And they're like, "Oh, A-Trak, yo,
Right,
I
right.
used to watch your DMC tapes." And I'd be like, "Yo, play me this music you're making. This is
Right.
cool shit." And I remember they burned me a CD. Most of the songs were unmastered, so the levels were mad low. But I brought home a CD that was like handwritten my name on it with a Sharpie. That was my little gold mine.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
a year before North American DJs really got hip to this sound.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I started doing mashups with it and experimenting with it.
Ooh, you just reminded me of Dirty South
Dirty
Dance.
South Dance.
Yeah,
That
that
was
was
the
so good,
manifesto.
man. That was good.
Thanks, man.
That was we're very ahead of its time. So
Thanks.
A-Trak did those of you that don't know, A-Trak did kind of a remix album using all
Yeah.
electronic samples and
Yeah.
hip hop vocals, and then Gucci Mane and Swizz Beatz sampled this record for It's Gucci Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you were ahead of the game on that because
Yeah.
you were using
I mean,
Gucci
a lot. Yeah,
vocals
sure,
on
sure.
that shit. Yeah.
The Dirty South Dance thing for me, I'll tell you, it was my mindset was there was all these electro records that I loved and I wanted to play in my sets, but it still felt so like a leap. It felt a little risky to play
Right.
full on electro in a
Right.
set because I was
Especially
such
from the hip hop.
exactly
Yeah,
coming from a
right,
hip hop
right, yeah.
standpoint that my way to like build a bridge was to make mashups and
Right,
put rap
right.
vocals over stuff. That
Right.
made it like more
Accessible
like,
or
it made
easy
it
to
safer.
digest for
yeah,
the average person.
It anchored
Right,
it
right.
into my background.
Yeah.
So at first I was making 2, 3, 4 mashups just for me to drop into my sets.
Yeah.
So that it had a connective
It could
tissue.
flow- yeah.
Yeah.
And then once I had a couple of ones, that led to me making a whole mixtape of it. So it was an interesting project because I had to produce each mashup individually
Yeah.
and then mix it. And this was a few months before I started Fool's Gold, as I was starting to produce Kid Sister and things like that, and doing more up-tempo work. And
Right.
it really felt like a sort of mission statement.
Yeah.
Whereas like this is like here's the sound that I'm going to be messing with for
Right.
the next couple of years.
Love it.
We
Yeah.
were doing the same thing within Humans.
Humans,
Yeah,
yes, I
and
love
it's
that
the
shit.
same kind of stuff. We were in the clubs. We like this. We need to bridge it.
Right.
You know, what are we gonna
What's the
do?
connective tissue?
This will be perfect. We'll
Yeah.
do this.
Shout
Yeah.
out, shout out, Dave Fogg,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
the overlord of the Inhumans, and now
He's still around.
the music
Yep.
director at Dre's.
I will still be here.
All right, now we have the Phil Collins Face Value album, and this is the 2015 reissue. 'cause
Yeah,
this
I've never
album-
seen this version.
Yeah.
Yeah, because this came out in like '81, right?
It's a big face right there.
Yeah.
Oh,
So the
Face
original
Value,
version
okay.
has young Phil Collins, and the 2015 reissue has
This is when he got
old.
fully grumpy.
Yeah.
If you see any recent interviews of Phil Collins,
really?
he is a grumpy dude.
And your cut on here is "I'm Not Moving."
All right, so it's funny when you're talking about like connections between the songs.
Yeah.
So we were just listening to Phantom,
Yes.
and which has like a vocoder sample.
Yep.
Big part of the reason why I like this record is that it's this sort of like groovy, like breezy dad rock kind of
Yep.
record that has a vocoder in the
Yes.
background. But not only that, it's I don't remember if it was Mehdi or Somi, but it was one of the French guys from Ed Banger who actually put me onto this song.
Oh, really?
It's one of the guys from the
Nice.
same
Well-
crew as Justice who were like, "Yo, have you ever peeped this sort of album cut on Face Value that has a vocoder?"
Yeah.
So
There it is.
yeah, there it is. But this is the kind of shit that like Armand and I listen to when we link up. Like people think that Duck Sauce is a house group.
Yeah.
We just listen
Just a
to
yacht
dad
rock
rock.
group.
and yacht
Yeah.
rock. That's it. That's all we do. That's all we listen to is like the breeziest, like
Let's put on
anything
some
that will
Michael
make your hair
McDonald.
flow in the breeze.
Steely Dan.
Oh, 100%.
Love
Yeah.
it.
That's the foundation of Duck
Yep.
Sauce is these kinds of records. Just
Yeah.
groovy 70s FM kind of records. I mean, this is funky, man.
Totally, and
Yeah.
this is and this is when Phil Collins was like in the air tonight,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he was like, but this is kind
He's
of more
basically making black music.
yeah, but this is more of a throwback to the '70s kind of a little more
Kinda yacht.
soulful.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, like the other stuff was much bigger produced, like
Yes.
larger produced, and on this album,
Yeah.
you know, so it's
And I-
it's interesting.
Yeah. This is a good song to just like listen to on repeat and zone out.
Yeah,
This is a good airplane song.
Yeah, I gotta add this to my Steely Dan and
Michael
Mike
McDonald.
McDonald
Yeah.
area.
my
Christopher
Yeah.
Cross.
vocoder playlist.
Yeah.
Yeah, with
with
vocoder.
with the Daft Punk and the Justice. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
All right, Phil Collins. I'm not moving. So A-Trak, you like vocoders and talk boxes.
apparently, I'm the brother of Chromeo.
Yeah, so this is Zap, More Bounce to the Ounce, which
Yeah.
has
Man.
been sampled like 100 times, 150 times.
Yeah.
Probably more than that.
Yeah.
I mean, the entire like backbone of West Coast gangster
Yeah.
rap in the 80s
I mean,
and
and
90s.
by the way, these drums are pretty close to the Get This Money, the Slum Village joint that I was
Oh,
playing.
yeah.
True that.
That same.
Tighter.
I mean, the Zap clap.
Yeah.
I remember Eric Sermon had a line about who's the first to bring the Zap clap to rap. And I was like, I like that. Zap clap to rap.
Zap clap
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
rap.
So you know what this brings me back to is like, you know, anybody, no matter what era you start DJing in, there's that sort of DJ education,
Yeah.
right? Where you have to learn the classics, and there's a canon of songs that every DJ needs to have in their
Right.
crate. There's
Planet
like
Rock.
different kinds of class, like
Yeah.
there's a set, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah,
classics,
yeah.
and even within that, there's different classic sets. But when growing up in Montreal, being very exposed to the New York tradition of DJing, I remember my brother and I would go to New York, buy these mixtapes, and even within mixtape culture, there was some mixtapes that would have like that sort of like barbecue set. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And which
Chilling in the
coincided.
backyard.
Yeah, and I'm like, so I remember we had this a mixtape by DJ SNS,
Uh-huh.
Old School Volume 2 or something like
Right.
that had a bunch of these records. So when I'm talking about More Bounce, Kenny Burke, Rising to the Top,
Yep.
Don't Look Any Further,
Yep.
even like I Can't Wait, and these kinds
Yeah.
of
yeah.
and then a lot of them.
Frankie Valli Mays.
Yep, Before I Let Go. A lot of them
Yeah.
are around 100 BPM.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the barbecue set.
Yeah.
And also, not only that, but if you would go to certain record stores in New York, like Beat Street or Rock and Soul, they had there was these bootlegs
Mhm.
that had all these records.
Yep.
This set was available on bootlegs that had like this like single color label. Some of them were orange, some of them
Yes.
were blue.
Yep.
Like Got to Be Real, mine was a pale blue. I
Yeah.
remember that. Right?
Yeah.
So you could get that set by going to Beat Street or one of those record stores and just buying the bootlegs
Yes.
that were a single color label.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Had
they would
a
have.
sticker on the wrapper that told you what it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there was like probably 2 songs per side.
Yep.
And it was loud.
Yeah.
And More Bounce was one of those for me. So yeah, it just brings me back to like learning that set.
And I mean, obviously, like we were talking earlier, like you said, Eric Sermon said,
Bring the Zap Clap to
yeah,
rap.
they sampled this on You Got to Chill, EPMD.
Yeah, of course.
A Biggie, Going Back to Cali. I mean, like tons of records.
Ain't No Future in Your
Tons.
Frontin'.
Ain't No Future in
Yeah.
Your Front.
Yeah, yeah,
and then
yeah.
MC Breed had a follow-up single to that. You remember? And
Yeah.
he sampled it again.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like
And
2
then
years
there
later.
was a Slum Village and MC Breed record called Do You that flipped
Yes.
one of the like unusual surprising
Yes.
parts. It's like one of those
then use that,
that's
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what Dilla used.
AKA B.I.G. Get it? Biggie. Also known as the Bon Appetit. Rappers can't sleep.
All right, and speaking of Biggie, you like
Yes.
that? See how we transitioned?
That was the second issue of that album.
This is the double vinyl,
Yeah. Yeah.
Ready to Die. And it includes Who Shot Ya, which is not on the first pressing, right? No. And your cut on here was...
Unbelievable. Come on.
Yeah.
I had to have a primo beat in here.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, what can we say about Biggie that hasn't already been said? Let's hear your
version.
story. Yeah, let's hear your story.
I mean, I'm often drawn to music that covers a few bases in a sense. That's not just one thing,
Okay.
right? And so I always loved how Big was commercially accessible but street,
Right.
right? like everyone loved Big.
Yeah.
And that's like as a DJ, and then as a DJ who then starts to make their own music. That
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of us aspire to, is to find the sweet spot, the sort of like Venn diagram of artists, right?
Right.
Where you're like, yo, you could do this, you tick these boxes.
Right.
So Big had such a sweet spot, and I always put Unbelievable in my top records because I think I feel like as a DJ. And as a foundationally a hip hop DJ, I feel like there needs to be at least one of my favorite records that has a hard beat, hard rhymes, and dope scratches.
Right.
Like it's always like, oh, what's a record that has great scratches,
Yeah.
but that's a classic just on the strength of what the record is.
Right.
And to me, Unbelievable is just like such a great combination of that. I mean, I had to pick a Primo record.
Yeah.
I said earlier that Dilla's my favorite producer, but Primo's right up there with him. And
His cuts are so precise.
Yeah.
All of his hooks are made up
every
with
scratch
cuts,
DJ,
yeah.
everyone loves Premier's scratches
Yeah.
because we all know that there's a lot of scratch DJs that let themselves go too much and like
Right.
overindulge in the
Right.
Yeah.
scratching. And Preem always knew how to produce his scratches.
Yeah, and phrase it. This record,
The
use
best
this
phrasing,
vocal,
the
use
best,
this,
the,
yeah.
like just the best choices,
Yeah.
the best pocket,
Yep.
the most like even just the rhythm of it, right? Like just
Yeah.
that perfect pocket where it's
Yeah.
just a little,
Yeah.
just a little lazy with the timing,
Yeah,
but in
yeah.
the best way.
Kind of pulls it, gives you that swing.
The
Yeah,
best,
yeah,
the best,
yeah.
the best.
Yeah, and obviously he knows. I mean, he knows so many records that he'll go, "Oh yeah, I'll take that lyric."
Yeah.
Yo,
he's
Preem's
not-
memory is crazy.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the things that I love about the podcast age is you get to hear even more interviews with Premier where it's just astounding to witness his memory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's he's on some superhuman shit. And by the way, another reason why I would pick a record like this is like as a turntablist, this like exemplified the kind of record that we would beat Juggle
Of course.
in
Right.
that era in 96, 97.
Does it
Even
have
though this
the crisp boom bap, the stuff in the middle.
90, I would even say 94, 95. Yeah, exactly. Like those separated sounds that you could flip into a pattern.
Notorious Big, Unbelievable. Shout out to Nick. All right, Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy LP, and your cut on here was
Dire Maker.
okay. So there's some trivia here.
What's up?
The
I don't know how to pronounce that.
Okay,
title.
well that's what the trivia is. The
Okay.
trivia is that the pronunciation is Jamaica, and
yeah?
this is actually a punchline to like a Cockney joke, where the guy's like, he's like, yeah, my bird went to the West Indies for the summer, and the other guy says, Jamaica, and he goes, nah, she went on her own accord.
Okay,
Like
I get it. Yeah, yeah.
Jamaica,
Yeah.
Jamaica. So that's the story on that. I totally brutalized that joke.
Well,
but,
no, it's good. It's good. And now I know how to pronounce
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, work on my
Exactly.
British accent. Yeah. So here it is. And this is kind of a romantic, like end of the night song. I always like
Yeah.
to play this at the end of the night,
Yeah.
And you said you were listening to Led Zeppelin around 10, 11 years old.
Yep.
The drum fill grabbed
Yeah.
you, right?
The what?
The
Sorry.
drum fill. The drum
Oh.
fill. Yeah.
I mean, Bonham in general is just a
Yeah.
monster.
Yeah. So
But
tell us
again,
about
like, when I was talking about these sort of like intersections, right? Like this is basically a hard rock group making a kind of reggae song.
it.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's my shit.
Yeah.
I always like those intersections.
Yeah.
Yeah, big Zeppelin fan. It's funny because sometimes years will go by where I don't listen to the record, and then you play a record that you grew up on, and you still know every drum fill by heart.
Yep.
Every little guitar lick. So yeah, these were foundational records for me. Another thing that's ill about Zeppelin is that like each one of them is a superhero
Right.
in their own lane.
Yep.
Right, because you had Robert Plant on his Gaelic shit, like
Right.
just weird mystical Gaelic stuff, and then Bonham just like Animal from the Muppets,
Yeah.
just like
Totally.
beast on the drums,
Great, yeah.
and like John Paul Jones with the ill synths, like he was soulful, like almost on some Herbie Hancock shit,
Mhm.
and Jimmy Page, studio wizard, producer,
right.
experimenter, and also just like straight up rock. And yeah, this record, I mean, there's a lot of Zeppelin records I could pick, but in the DJ context, this is a
Yeah.
record that you could play as a DJ.
Oh yeah, I mean there's the top to bottom albums really.
Yeah.
With Led Zeppelin, it's so hard
Yeah.
to pick
Yeah.
one cut. I mean,
This was the rock
but this
barbecue.
this is one of my favorites as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
And you had another one on your list, which we didn't bring today, but
Fool in the Ring.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, what can you tell us about that one?
Similar.
Yeah.
Similar in the sense of like it's not Zeppelin in their hard rock pocket.
Right.
It's Zeppelin making more. I mean, that one was almost yacht-y.
Yes.
Yachty. It was a little yachty.
A little yachty.
Yeah.
See what he did there?
Yeah. I mean, these guys could do no wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The beginnings of Sublime here. That's what we have.
Yeah.
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 UB40 too, maybe.
Let's go. Why
Yeah.
not? Let's take it there.
Um,
Cool. Jamaica. Now I know how to pronounce it.
Jamaica?
I learned something today.
No, she went on her own accord. All right, we have a bonus track, which I
little
found
surprise.
this. I found this in my collection, which has a $0 price tag, which means it's worth absolutely nothing.
I agree.
A-Trak's first record, Enter Ralph Wiggum. Please, sir, do the honors.
$1999, I think.
Yeah.
I was fully still in the scratch world. Like it's funny thinking back at those first couple of years of my DJ career. I wasn't even really a DJ. I was a scratch kid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like full turntablism. I was
DJ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bedroom turntablist. Fell in love with scratching and like the sonic exploration of scratching. Like just the these weird sounds.
Yeah.
The weird sounds you can create with by manipulating records.
Yeah.
And my whole life was centered around entering battles, trying to win battles, won a few, won more, and that just like earning my stripes in the battlefield. And in those years, I met Peanut Butter Wolf. Originally, there was a compilation that came out called Deep Concentration.
Yes, I remember
Right?
that.
And my boy Joseph Patel put together that compilation.
Yeah.
And there was a tour for Deep Concentration.
Yeah.
Peanut Butter Wolf and Cut Chemist were the residents
Right.
of that tour. And then in different cities, they got certain like-minded DJs to play.
Yeah.
When the tour hit Montreal and Toronto, they got myself and Kid Koala to play those
Nice.
two shows. I was like 16. And that's when I struck a friendship with Peanut Butter Wolf.
Yeah.
Him and, not to say I didn't have one with Cut Chemist, but Wolf and I, something happened there.
Yeah.
Even though he was like 10 years older than me, we both have, a sense of humor that's a little off. And I think there's something that connected where, I don't know, some sort of bond was born
Yeah.
there. And Wolf was very encouraging of me. And if I would go to San Francisco, he hadn't moved to LA yet. He was still in the Bay. If I'd go to San Francisco for a gig, ever since the point that I'd met him, he'd be like, oh, stay at the house. I'd stay at his place. And he would just like educate me on records, play me stuff.
Nice.
On some like, oh, you like DJ Premier? Well, here's the Cameo record that he sampled on Superstar. Oh shit, he sampled a slow jam for like Superstar? What? And just understanding that stuff.
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
him being like, oh, well, I know you like scratching. Do you want to hear some weird Dr. Dre, like world class Wrecking Crew shit? Like, here's Dr. Dre with a Jerry curl.
Right.
What? He used to like wear leather outfits? What?
That's awesome.
And just like, show that whole world to me.
Yeah.
And Stone's Throw was already in effect. He had his record label that was truly one of the greatest independent hip hop labels there ever was.
Yep.
And the first thing so he started encouraging me to record myself. And there was this sort of like method to making like scratch records at the time where you would just get a 4-track recorder and just grab a drum sample, grab some sort of music sample, and then scratch vocals and create a sort of like scratch piece out of it. And Wolf curated a compilation for Strength magazine, the skateboard magazine.
Remember that too?
On FFRR, Pete Tong's label.
Yep.
It was called Subtext.
Yep.
If you can find that, get it. Madlib was making interludes. It was it was ill. So I made a track for that. That was probably my first piece of music that came out, but it was a song on a compilation. And then Wolf decided to start making 45s on Stone's Throw. And you gotta like put yourself in the time capsule that in those years, no one had brought back the 45. Since then, it's become
Right.
a sort of fetishized thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people make 7-inches, but
Right.
in 1999, no one had brought back the 45 in years and years.
Totally.
And he was asking a few of his friends to make, especially sort of like experimental music and things that didn't fit in the box.
Right.
You know, he had this friend called Captain Funkaho, just making weird,
Yes.
weird shit. That was one of them. And he asked me to make a record for this series of
Yeah.
45. So this was my first A-Trak release. Enter Ralph Wiggum, named after the Simpsons character.
Yeah.
This is like fully, bedroom me. The Simpsons nerd, the Scratch nerd, the whole thing.
4-track.
Yeah.
What do you? I mean, when you hear this now, what are your feelings on it? I mean, do you?
I still think it's interesting.
Yeah.
Now we flipped it to the B-side.
Right.
The B-side was a recording of a beat juggle at a show
Table
called Table
Turns.
Turns in New York. I was juggling Space Dust.
Yeah.
It's interesting to listen to it now because, this is a point in time where scratching in scratch music was experimental. It was left field.
Mm-hmm.
Fans of turntablists were fans of DJ Crush,
Mm-hmm.
Shadow, that
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Right.
Everything's branched off in even more sort of ramifications since then. But this takes me back to that point in time where it's like Herb magazine, and you know what I mean. It's just
Yeah.
it's that slice of time.
Totally
Yeah.
remember Herb magazine.
Yeah.
This is Let the Record Show. I'm Mike Pizzo,
War and Peace.
and
A-Trak.
thanks, guys. Peace.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Seduce your brain from the temple